will get you well into position to achieve that. And so specific to master plans, there are a number of expectations under the first best practice for master plans. And as you can see here, the RC criteria for master plans state that you reflect the community's desired direction for the future, meaning that you've done a nice job reaching out to your residents, to your businesses, and to your volunteers to determine what is the direction we're going and how do we want to get there. It identifies strategies and priority redevelopment areas. So once you have that information of where we're going and how are we getting there, what are some of those key areas that you want to focus your efforts on to improve throughout the community? And then you address land use and infrastructure, including streets, and that you're focusing an effort on understanding the conditions of your infrastructure and building a afterwards, after your master plan is done, building a capital improvement plan that reflects the goals and ideologies of your master plan as it relates to infrastructure and land uses. You include a zoning plan, as noted, that will guide zoning, and then you will incorporate recommendations for implementation. So this will be an area where, as you work through this process as a planning commission and you hear from the public on sort of priority action items, you have the opportunity to establish projects and determine who, when, and how those projects will be completed. And then you may even include some cost estimates related to implementation of those. The progress on the master plan should be reported annually. This way, you're not taking a plan that you spend a lot of effort in completing and putting it on a shelf, never to be seen again. It's really important that your plan is action-oriented and that it's realistic, that the actions that you're putting into this plan are achievable and that you do have the capacity, both with the city staff and the volunteers that you have in place to be able to complete these projects, as well as being fiscally responsible and making sure that the projects do fit within the city's budget. And then lastly, you'll want that master plan to be accessed online and able to be viewed by anyone who may be interested, whether that be a potential business looking to locate in the city, a new resident looking to locate into the city, or existing residents just wanting to understand the process of how projects come to fruition and how they get supported by the master plan. And so with those criteria, we will be working through this process to meet each and every one of those criteria to ensure that when it comes time to certify you as a redevelopment ready community, the state will be able to do so.
So we've gone through your 2008 master plan as well as the 2015 master plan update. We asked city administration to weigh in on what's been accomplished so far and what items maybe aren't applicable anymore and new issues and strategies that need to be addressed for this current master plan update. We also want to be sure we're aligning with the Parks and Rec master plan that was updated in 2020. So we'll be reviewing that and incorporating those recommendations. And then just to recap for you, the 2008 master plan focused on overall preservation efforts and also establishing neighborhood guidelines to keep existing character in place. There was also discussion of redevelopment opportunities along the commercial corridors, city beautification, and pedestrian improvements. And the 2015 update had a lot of these same ideas, but did focus on aging in place. Huntington Woods has a significant older population, so emphasis was placed on planning appropriately for that population to make sure they can stay in the city and there's housing opportunities for them. And then commercial redevelopment opportunities were also a focus of this plan, especially along Woodward Avenue, and complete streets was also a priority, planning for non-motorized travel and making safe connections. So here are the major items that have been accomplished since those plans were adopted. Many of these are evaluation and amendments of the zoning ordinance standards to help meet the goals in the plan, landscaping standards, residential construction standards, amending property maintenance standards to encourage greater conformance to the code, and also include an implementation of bike routes and signage based on the Complete Streets chapter of the master plan. And then further, there's some additional items that have been accomplished, including updating street tree regulations, requirements for grading and soil erosion, updating engineering design standards, and reevaluating the allowable density in the Woodward Avenue corridor to align with the goal of becoming a more mixed-use district. So here are then some actions that were noted to be retained in the master plan update, things that remain important and relevant, and then some of these items will need to be refreshed or revised, especially if you notice where it says refresh, retail nodes and redevelopment opportunities along Woodward and Coolidge remain some top action items. So we have created a spreadsheet, that just a worksheet for you to go through in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to send that to Hank to then give out to you. And this details the same items and more that I just went over. And so then our next working session with you will focus on going through those plan items with you to address those. So you kind of have some homework to do before our next working session. And then this is the recommended proposed outline for the master plan. This includes the sections that we discussed earlier that are recommended or required by the state, and additional sections that are typical in the plan and that are useful. So we have the executive summary. This is what most people are going to read. So it's typically 4 to 6 pages with maps and graphics. It's going to be more user-friendly. And it's something that we also recommend that you provide separately on your website. So because it's very easy to share for people to download and to print out. And then the next section is community feedback. We'll have this kind of more upfront in the plan to show how the community was engaged and provide a summary of input, and then go into vision and goals and objectives, and then go to the main part of the plan, which is existing conditions, updating those, and then those are kind of blended with the recommendations. And there's going to kind of be these sub plans: the housing diversification plan, economic development strategy, the Woodward Avenue corridor plan and complete streets plan, and then your future land use plan and map. And then finally, you have your action plan. And this is a summary of goals and strategies, as well as the priorities, partners, and timeline. And then a zoning plan is also included in that section. So we're looking at about a 9-month schedule for creating the plan. And then the last few months of the whole 12-month period is adoption of the plan. So during the first phase, this is the phase that we're in now. We're focused on kicking off the plan process and data gathering and creating the plan outline. And now we're kind of shifting into the second phase of the process, which is the visioning and evaluation. So we'll be holding a working session with you to review the past master plans and talk about some best practices, and then begin to build what your top priorities are. And then we'll hold a community visioning forum or open house and have a survey to discuss challenges and opportunities. And focus on some of the top areas that the city has asked us to focus on, which is housing and redevelopment opportunities. And then we'll also be talking with developers and property owners to get a better sense of what's possible in the city and where. And the third phase is where we start to develop the recommendations and prioritize those. So we would hold 2 more working sessions with Planning Commission, and then also have a public workshop to review the draft plan and then start to prioritize those strategies. And the fourth and final phase is the plan review and adoption process with Planning Commission and the City Commission. So to get the most out of engagement, you'll need to make sure to advertise events and tell people ways that they can participate. So our team can help with creating flyers. We've actually already created the project website. We've listed the link here, which is hwmasterplan.com. So that link is live now, so you can go on there. We recommend you create a press release and contact some local newspapers to get the word out. Let people know that the update is taking place. Social media is also key. Facebook, Nextdoor, email blasts to your distribution lists will generate a lot of the input, especially if people can just click on a simple link to the website or take a survey. And then during our pre-kickoff with the city, we've also talked about having yard signs and flyers put up around popular walking routes and high traffic areas to get the word out. And then also outreach to specific groups is important as well, like the schools, Black Lives Matter, Huntington Woods, and the Jewish community. So updating the master plan, what is this going to produce? What are your top priorities? So based on our conversations with the city so far, we want to be sure that the plan is framed by community input and that engagement is really key to having a successful plan. Meeting the criteria for RRC is very critical with assistance from MEDC. And then a housing diversification plan is needed. That's something that we've heard, and we'll also need a lot of input from the residents. And sustainability and green infrastructure can be woven through all the recommendations. And then recently, the diversity and inclusion consultants were chosen by the city. So we'll be coordinating with them on some of our efforts. So for next steps, we've launched the project website. So like I said, that link just went live and it's listed here. And then we'd like to hold another working session with you to review existing conditions, best practices, and review the master plans with you. So we put May 17th question mark because you're going to be voting on that session date next week to finalize that date. But it likely would be May 17th. And like I said, we're going to give you some homework to do to complete the master plan review worksheet. And then you're going to submit that to Hank by May 3rd. So that'll give us a chance to review your comments and summarize your responses for that meeting. And we also just set the date today for the Community Visioning Forum or open house. It's going to be June 3rd from 4 to 7 p.m. A local food truck is also going to be there too. So it's going to be located at the Parks and Rec Center outside and then also in the gym. And we're going to open up the doors. We want to, having the food truck there is great. It just this coincidence it's on the same day. So that will kind of help generate some more people to come and capture people who might not normally come to meetings like this. So for this event, we'll also be sure to have some social distancing rules and cleaning procedures in place to keep everybody safe. And lastly, spread the word, please. We'd like a commitment from each of you to spread the word. We suggest you reach out to 5 to 10 people, let them know what's going on and invite them to participate and stay involved in the process. So now we're going to open it up for questions and also spend some time discussing your priorities and challenges that are in the city. And we have a few maps in our Miro map that I'm going to show you. So I'm going to share that. And we've put on here, a map of the city, and this is a diagram that we had created for the RTA mobility oriented development study showing where redevelopment opportunity sites are. And then we just have some of the commercial corridors as well, and the city site here. So this will help kind of guide our discussion, and I'll be taking notes as you provide feedback. And also Brad Strader is going to help facilitate our discussion tonight.
Yes, so are there any general questions about the overall process and the things we went through in the presentation that you want to clear up or talk about? Otherwise, we'll go to the maps, but we'll pause for a minute in case anybody has any questions of what's been covered.
This is Jay Schwartz.
Mm-hmm.
My concern here is, and it's a very significant concern here, is process and procedures. Now, just by way of background here, I have degrees in both business and engineering. And part of that was to make sure that when you gather data, it is statistically valid and defensible. In the past, this has not been done. What has been done is that essentially decisions have been made by whoever makes the most noise, and goes up and makes the most noise between a volunteer, one of the city boards, or in front of the city commission. So the action item requested is that in any of these surveys, not only do we not only need the number of people, but we need certain demographic information about them. Age, where in the city they live, and things like that. Further, there has to be information that we can deduce from that or actually measure that is it relevant. So I want to take that you should, let me rephrase that. You should take any and all precautions to make sure that just because one person, 5 or 10 people stand up and make a lot of noise, that does not get translated into something that says, oh, well, the community wanted that, so we're going to do it, when only it's 5 or 10 or a handful of people. There have been a couple of major, there's been one major project here where that was done, and it's an invalid, public money has been spent and it's invalid. So also that all the documentation, not only the results, but also the process and the raw data needs to be accounted for, that all of these need to be in formal written reports subject to review and analysis. Now, in that same vein, that there are external parties that have already made reports and analysis and surveys. Some of them have been documented, others there is zero documentation available. But whatever, all of the reports must be available for genuine peer review. And either they are accepted in review or not reviewed. And along those lines, when you have a community event at the rec center, which you're planning, which is not bad, but part of the information you need to gather is the aforementioned demographic information. Because when you have a community event, you don't know, is it 1, 5, 10, 100? Somebody says something, how do you know that it reflects truly what's going on in the community? So while it's not a bad idea, and it's a good idea, but that also must be accounted for. Also, it must be accounted for that are the persons who are actually responding, both online and in person, are in fact residents. So that's a summary of what I would like to see and what I believe actions that are mandatory in this entire project in order to obtain valid data that will survive peer review, and not just one people or a small group of people that stand up and make the most noise about their particular interests, but instead reflects the desires of the entire community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the comment. Others? All right, we can move into the mapping exercise. So this exercise is partly to get you thinking about the master plan and partly to get us oriented on what are some of the key factors, issues, topics, areas in the city that you'd like us to look at. So Anne-Marie, you can talk about any one of the areas, but maybe we'll start with the Woodward corridor. And the idea of this mural board, if you can see the green notes here, is you have an idea of a site or an area to look at or something that you'd like to see evaluated in the plan. This is the time to start percolating those ideas. So in terms of Woodward itself, what are your thoughts about the way the corridor looks now, the right of way, and the developments that are along Woodward? What are your thoughts about the entry features into Huntington Woods from the north and south? So what are kind of your aspirations for Woodward?
Okay, well, seeing as I don't see anybody's hands up, maybe some ideas that we might want to take a look at are where are potential nodes, or how does Woodward start? How do we get going there? What do you want to see at your entryways? Do you want Woodward to look similar to 11 Mile? Do you want 11 Mile to look similar to Woodward? What types of development are you looking for? These are just a few things that we're throwing out there to see if anybody has any comments that they'd like to make.
Yeah, hey, this is Michelle Elder, City Commissioner. I
Hi,
have
Michelle.
some thoughts. Thank you so much for the opportunity to look at this map and talk together as a group tonight. Woodward Corridor is a significant corridor regionally. It's on First Smart Bus is the most highly ridden corridor in Michigan for the Smart Bus, and with the proximity to downtown Royal Oak, Ferndale, even Birmingham, that's biking distance. I think we have a real opportunity to make that regional connection stronger, making it more pedestrian friendly. I think that's the key to getting it to be more redevelopment ready. Even the Smart Bus site itself, the bus stop, those are areas that I think could be further improved for bus transit riders, as well as people that might want to connect intermodally. We now have only three MOGO bike shares, and that could be an opportunity to better connect with the other centers of activity, modes of activity in the region. And that is definitely, I see as a benefit for living in Huntington Woods, because then you're able to walk and not have to use a car necessarily. There's a question about station. I'm talking about the actual bus station, I think. And then just in the redevelopment of Woodward by itself, I think there has been some efforts to talk to the property owners in the past about redevelopment, but to me, it's not just about rezoning. It's also about, in this process, I hope that we have this opportunity to come up with a vision for promoting mixed use and more pedestrian friendly. Maybe it's neighborhood serving, maybe it is regional serving, but mixed use, slightly higher density. I don't know what the community would accept, but I think we need to talk about that. And just zoning alone, rezoning itself is not a strategy. We have to, I hope, come out after this visioning process, come out with an implementation plan to engage with the development community, to promote this corridor as a place that's redevelopment ready, that Huntington Woods is in the game of community development. So I think it even goes beyond the technical aspects of the master plan, is that what do we do afterwards? I'm really excited to see the previous gentleman talk about the economic development plan, because I think that's, we can draw pretty pictures and talk to each other about what we envision as the future. But it's the action items after that, and engaging with the development community and promoting it regionally. And lastly, I think really important, and I was hoping to see that the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan be further ahead in the presentation. I saw that it was mentioned, which is great. But I think it's just such an important topic to us in terms of economic sustainability. We do have this anti-racism plan, and I hope that the consultant will look into that further, because the reason for that is we want to continue to aspire to be a place where it's welcoming and inclusive of people who live here, people who might want to live here, right? The future. And the demographics in the US is changing. That's all around us. And we are still now we're 92, 93% white community. And there's a reason for that, to acknowledge that zoning had something to do with the way that the city has developed. And we have a real opportunity to be more inclusive and welcoming, because it is strategic for our future. The demographics are changing to half minority white by 2045. And where are we as Huntington Woods? And as a parent here of a mixed race family, we're experiencing things in a different way than most other families are here. And so I think it is a much more critical aspect of this conversation that I hope that as we move forward in this process, as a community can, learn from and digest and talk about, because this is a real issue before us, and it means our ability to attract, retain new families in the future, and also make it a more equitable system so that we can help our seniors age in place. I think that's a critical part of the previous plan that needs to be acknowledged and moved over. One last thing, and I'll stop talking. University of Michigan did urban planning program came and did a study with us, and they looked at a variety of things from housing to amenities and lifestyles that's needed for the seniors. And they worked with our senior advisory committee on that. I would encourage you to look through that data because they really did some really good work. They did not just, I think to Jay's point, you can't solely rely on survey data. They did a number of focus sessions. They did a survey. They did a community-wide event. So there was a lot of work put into that. No survey is perfect, that's just reality. But there is some real data that I think our senior advisory committee is looking at. And it's not just about redevelopment, it's about the lifestyles and the amenities that that they think are really critical to be able to stay in this community. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Brad, why don't we take a question from Bree Stocker? She was up next.
Sure.
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to second voice what Michelle said and just kind of reiterate the importance of the DEI lens when looking at the future of the community. I did hear you mention something about diversification, like in housing, and I'd be curious what that means and how you guys were looking at that. I also just kind of had a question about the Woodward corridor. There are areas in that corridor that I believe are privately owned. And so how would we deal with that? And yeah, those are my two questions, but also just wanted to kind of back up Michelle in kind of importance that the reason why I wanted to be here today was just to make sure that we were focusing on DEI and diversification and things like that.
Sure. Well, let me start out with a couple of responses to your question. And somebody who had asked about the map on the left is from the RTA plan, and they say stop, but it's really, or it says station. And this was sort of the RTA's plan for eventually having bus rapid transit on Woodward. And so over the last probably 6 years, there's been studies done for bus rapid transit on Woodward, and they identified some potential stations that could be consolidated stops like the fast stops, but they could be more involved and had level boarding and other things that would have a limited stop. So you could get from Pontiac to downtown Detroit in a less time than a typical bus where you stop at a lot of different stops. So that's why that map says station, but it's really the same as the stops that Michelle mentioned. For diversity in housing, so this is one of the things that the MEDC looks at as part of the redevelopment ready community program. And it's kind of limited in diversity housing in Huntington Woods because you have single family homes and you don't have a lot of property that's available for new types of housing, but there are some possibilities. Woodward is one of the places where you could have mixed use of residential and office or other uses along Woodward. So one of the ideas could be redevelopment on Woodward that would allow housing instead of just commercial. This has been discussed on the east side of Woodward in Royal Oak, where they used to just have offices and business, and their part of their planning now is to allow residential also along the east side of Woodward. So that could be something that we could do in Huntington Woods. Other ideas of Huntington Woods that have come up from MEDC was accessory housing, or looking at different types of housing on a single family lot. I don't know how popular that'll be in Huntington Woods. Some of the other communities on Woodward have talked about it. It's actually on the Ann Arbor Planning Commission or a City Commission tonight to have a ordinance to allow accessory housing in parts of the city. So one of the things we'll be doing through our process and at the public workshop is showing different types of housing that might be multiple family, it looks like single family, and see if there's interest in the community and by the officials on allowing accessory housing within the city. So diversity of housing in Huntington Woods is different than diversity housing in Detroit or across the region, but we are looking to see, is there potential for different housing types in Huntington Woods? And if so, what would it look like and where would it possibly go?
Thanks, Brad. If we can take a question from Commissioner Jeff Jenks now.
I'm concerned on the whole transit, the regional transit plan and the FAST plan basically bypass Huntington Woods. There is no stop at Lincoln. The majority of the trips turn and go down Main Street, north and south, so that there's nothing going by Huntington Woods. There is no stop at Lincoln. There is a stop sometimes at 11. Lincoln is one of the most valuable stops on the line because it's less than a quarter of a mile from Oakland Community College, where you've got the potential for minority students to attend who are, and Woodward would be one of the good stops, as well as Main Street. If we are going to look at diversity and inclusion in Huntington Woods, if we are going to look at senior access to transportation, a stop at Lincoln is critical. If we're going to look at economic development along the Woodward corridor, that same thing is true. I just think that we really need to look at the fast line and the regional transit line. And if we are going to be silent, as we have been for the last 10 years on transit, then we ought to get out of transit planning. We ought to get out of talking about diversity, where the only way you can be diverse if you don't have decent public transportation is by basically being wealthy. I'm just very, very much concerned about that. We need to look seriously at that. We need to take an active position. Accessory housing, if there are virtually no minorities in the city, for me to put an accessory house on my property doesn't really add to diversity. I love the idea of accessory housing, but we have to be much more creative than just that approach.
And on the transit, so this map is out of the RTA's latest transit plan, and they are talking about RTA buses or bus rapid transit only on Woodward. And so that's why they worked with Huntington Woods to identify where there could be redevelopment along
So
Woodward and where
they've
it would be. So
Brad, they have changed the frequency, so the routing is not via Main Street and Royal Oak anymore.
it could, there could still be a spinoff that would go
That's
also
not
to
a problem.
Woodward,
Yeah.
but the main line would be on Woodward. That's the current thinking now.
Now, is that temporary because of the restaurants and stuff like that on Main Street in Royal Oak, or is that a long-term plan?
You know, I couldn't really say because you never know what the RTA board will do, but the current
Well,
thinking of the
up
RTA staff is Woodward, partly
Good.
because the time it takes to get to downtown Royal Oak and back would incur too much duration, and it's better to stay on Woodward to attract more riders.
But then they need to stop definitely at Lincoln for everything. And the rationale behind that is it has some of the highest public usage, and it has diversity at the stop. And the stop is not just at 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. The stop is all day long, including into the evening.
Yep, and I think this is an area where the master plan can really come into play, because when they looked at the ridership in Huntington Woods, you've got some fairly decent ridership potential with the residential and also the development along the west of Woodward. But if there could be some redevelopment there that increase residential or increase the densities along Woodward, that would further help position the city to
But-
get
but
stop or
they-
two.
But they also need to look at that stop as it relates to Royal Oak. Because it's a high usage around the clock stop. And I mean, the people that are going to go home from Oakland are going to have to take the Huntington Woods side south. Actually, it becomes, yeah, it's still a Huntington Woods stop.
Yep.
But I mean, we can't sit in a blind vacuum at that location.
Yeah, and I think
when I-
there's good energy between like from Ferndale North and the city of Detroit as well, and Highland Park, the Woodward Avenue communities, and working with the administration in Oakland County and the RTA. So I think we're seeing more willingness from all the groups coming together. I think we've still got, maybe the vision of the cities is a little bit different than MDOT's vision for Woodward. So I think still involving MDOT in part of these communications is going to be just as important as the land uses along Woodward. So
What is the narrowing on Woodward? Ferndale, Pleasant Ridge, where does that go to?
So right now, the kind of a road diet study that MDOT is doing is Ferndale and potentially extending into Pleasant Ridge. But we just had a report in Birmingham last week from MDOT that they're considering doing a road diet study from 696 through Birmingham. So we'll keep you posted on that. We have a presentation coming up in Birmingham. It's possibly going to start this summer. So Royal Oak has approached MDOT about doing something along Woodward. Birmingham did the same thing. So I think and it was partly because Ferndale got the ball rolling, and now they're saying, can we extend the road diet study north all the way to Woodward, or at least evaluating it a little bit more. So
Can we
it's
get
in
an
play.
evaluation of what that impact would be on commercial on Woodward? Because I think it would increase commercial demand as traffic slowed.
Yep, I haven't seen the scope or what they're doing or anything, but that'll be certainly something we'll be looking at and recommending on behalf of Huntington Woods and Birmingham and maybe some of the other communities, to make sure that that's one of the criteria that they look at. Because in the past, MDOT was primarily looking on moving cars and not so much transit and bikes and pedestrians and economic development. And we want to raise all those other factors instead of just being level of service for cars. So it's good.
Thank you.
Next
Now
one.
we'll take a question from our planning commissioner, Mike Wright, who's been waiting, so we'll get to him.
Thanks, Hank. So I want to back up a little bit to something Anne Marie initially said, and that was about kind of where our priorities lie. And there has been so much noise over the past year, particularly in social media, everything from what the Woodward corridor is going to look like, to affordable housing, to senior housing, to diversification. I just want to make sure that we are chasing the right things here, things that the city actually wants. I have yet to see any real data on a lot of these things that we say we need to do this, we need to look at this. I'm all for it. If the city wants to increase our number of 7-Elevens, then great. If everybody wants to do that, let's do it. But I feel like we're listening to a lot of noise that might not be completely representative of what the entire city thinks. So I just want to make sure we check ourselves as we establish these priorities and make sure they really are priorities for as much of the city as we can. That's it.
Yeah, and I think with this master plan, the intent is most of the city is going to be retained as a pristine neighborhoods and housing stock and so forth. But even in those areas, are there places we can do to improve the sidewalk connections or places maybe to have bike lanes or something else on certain streets? So even in those areas, there could be things you promote. But I think a lot of the focus of this is the non-residential areas to see if there are changes that are desirable. And if so, how do you make those happen? And somebody brought up, like on the west side of Woodward, it's private property, so you can use zoning and other things to encourage it, but you'd probably have to have more tools available than just changing the zoning to get something to happen. Who's next, Hank? Let's, we talked about Woodward a little bit more, and I know it's hard to see all this, but what if we go like to the Coolidge commercial cluster area there? We don't have a lot of commercial areas, but maybe this will provoke things as you look at like the Rite Aid and the bank. What are your thoughts about that commercial? Is this just what you need for a commercial neighborhood, or are there other things you'd like to see added to that part of the city?
Hank, you're on mute.
I'd like to talk about Woodward if I could.
Oh, yep, go ahead.
We had one left over. I'm sorry, Jay's.
Well, it's Marcia Fleming, and that Woodward there was exactly what I wanted to talk about. I know that those particular condos, apartments, whatever they're called, are zoned whatever way they are. But I'm wondering if we have the ability to make it so that if those properties are sold, that they can be rezoned in a different way, that they could then be, I don't know the rules about zoning, so that's why I'm stumbling a little. And Hank probably knows the answer to this. Is there a way that says that instead, like for instance, if we want to make it so that instead of it being individual apartments, that if the owner of that complex sells it, he has to sell it so that it can be now a multi-level apartment building or
Marcia,
something like that.
Were you
So
talking
really-
south of Lincoln?
I'm not
Huntington-
sure where they are. I just know
we-
those condos there.
Okay, those are actually in Royal Oak.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, the ones that are
Okay.
south of Lincoln are actually in Royal Oak's corporate limits.
Okay, so with,
And zoning goes with the land, not with the owner. So zoning law
Right.
doesn't allow you to change the zoning because the owner changes. So it can be a difficult thing with this city, but you can't change the zoning because the owner changes.
okay, so now with this map that we have here, you were showing the properties in, okay, so that's the businesses that we have.
Sure. What's in the-
Okay, what businesses, for clarification, what businesses do we have here?
Actually, if you're looking on Woodward, just to be clear, the BP is wholly in Royal Oak. The building that is one north of the BP, a portion of that building is actually in Royal Oak, and a portion of that building is actually in Huntington Woods. That
Okay,
building straddles, so everything north of that would be Huntington Woods. Everything
11.
south of that would be Royal Oak.
okay. So, does the city have authority to somehow mandate what structures can be on a piece of property?
The city can mandate through zoning and design guidelines what can go on a piece of property if somebody proposes a redevelopment plan. So the city has the authority to a degree, but there's a lot of flexibility. Most of the opportunity is available to the property owner. So the city can, for example, say the types of uses allowed, the height of the building, the width of the building, how many parking spaces, so it can influence the design. Some communities have design guidelines, but the timing of the activity is up to the property owner.
And what Huntington Woods properties are behind, are west
Yes,
west of the businesses?
all residential.
All
Is,
residential. Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
the historic section?
Mostly. The historic
Okay.
district encompasses 108 homes that start where York would be the easternmost border of that. Part of it, starting
Okay.
at Lincoln North, is not in the historic district.
Okay, but I see Salem and, okay, so like the bank areas, the bank is in that complex and, okay,
That's all, yes, that would all be north. That would all be Huntington Woods corporate limits.
I understand. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you.
It's been
Brad,
very informative.
Thank you. Brad,
I have one additional comment, and I'll wait till the end till everybody else has who hasn't had a chance to speak yet. But I do have one additional comment that I forgot to make. But I'll go to the end of the line here.
thank you, Jay. You'll get another chance. Brad, did you want to go to Coolidge?
Yeah, we can go to Coolidge next, like by the Rite Aid and the bank. To me, I've always kind of thought that there's probably some excess parking there that could be used for something else potentially. But what does anybody else think of that commercial area in terms of visual quality, the uses there, something you'd like to see there that's not there? Or do you like it the way it is and let it continue on for 10 years?
I'm sorry, we had a little audio disruption here. Could you please repeat what area you were just speaking about? Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's on the map here. So it'd be north and south of Lincoln on the east side of Coolidge. So if you know, like the Rite Aid and the Chase Bank, kind of that area, the non-residential part of Coolidge.
We have Bree Stacker with her hand up. Bree, could you unmute yourself?
Yeah, so I sit on the board of review, and I know oftentimes I have folks who have homes in this vicinity who kind of come and think that their property isn't as valuable or isn't shouldn't be assessed as high as it is based on the location and the close proximity to a Rite Aid or a Chase Bank or something. And I imagine the same thing goes on the Woodward side. I personally think having more commercial would be great because I think that helps the city in terms of taxes and things like that, and just having places to go, restaurants, fun things, walkable. That's fabulous. But I wonder what the impact would be of the surrounding neighbors to like these areas, and how we would kind of sell it and make it beneficial to them and make it worthwhile, or something like that.
Brad, if I could give perhaps a little bit of a history here that might help us out. The Rite Aid has been the Rite Aid since before, I mean, it was Perry Drugs, years and years ago, for anybody that remembers that. They have a tremendous amount of
Used to be a
parking.
grocery store.
Yeah, they have a tremendous amount of parking, and that's was beneficial. The Chase Bank also has a good amount of parking. They own the property on the other side of Sherwood, and they've turned that into an ATM with stacking lanes on there. And it's one of their biggest used ATMs. And then to the north of the Rite Aid, we have a playground, which is Park, Elgin Park, right on the corner there. So that's kind of a little bit about what's gone on there. And when you take a look at what is going there or what could be proposed there, there wouldn't be, with the exception of possible multifamily housing, that type of thing. Again, the only property that the city has that's in that area right over there is the parks. That's the only property that the city actually owns there. So Brad, perhaps if you want to weigh in a little bit on Coolidge with some thoughts.
Yeah, so I guess we're seeing some Rite Aids and CVS's and Walgreens are finding that they don't need as much parking as they used to have. Sometimes because of drive-through, internet shopping and so forth. And the same with banks, that they're looking at repurposing their parking, but you don't have a lot of area there to add, retail or other business uses that would also require a lot of parking. But this could be a possibility of looking at like a small, like a 4-unit residential as an option for some of these areas where you could put that in and still preserve parking available for the bank and the Rite Aid.
I just want to say that would be great. I think that the neighbors would actually appreciate that too, because I feel like a lot of their issues are with people coming in out of the parking lot and bags flying around and things like that. Whereas if it was neighbors, they're your neighbors rather than, people going to a pharmacy or something.
Any other thoughts on Coolidge?
Yeah, on the west side, I think Oak Park is planning on traffic calming, biking and things like that. So we ought to be considering that as well. One of the things the manager brought to us about a year ago, I think, was the whole idea of using water retention on part of that side as well, along with traffic calming. We don't need it for parking, but it would mean that, for example, we might actually be able to enlarge Peasley Park if that traffic calming went out a little bit. So I mean, that becomes another usage there. From a tax point of view, it doesn't help the city. If we could get much better use on Woodward and redevelopment, we would be able to expand our tax base. But even there, I think there's an old court agreement which limits maybe just the commercial buildings, because the city had sold off so much of its business property.
Yep.
But I think one of the options on Coolidge is traffic calming and the biking.
And there was a joint, I think, Berkeley, Oak Park, Huntington Woods, green infrastructure that did look at traffic calming and green infrastructure on Coolidge and 11 Miles. So we'll be sure to take a look at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on Coolidge?
Brad, we have Jim Park, one of our zoning board of appeals members, would like to speak.
Sure.
Jim?
Hello, everyone. Not sure if you can hear me. I just want to kind of extend on the thought that Bree mentioned a little bit ago. She mentioned, places to walk to and things to do, areas of interest. And when I think of how we're using what's on Coolidge right now, I see the Rite Aid, I see the bank, and I see a park, frankly, that is not very well utilized. I'm wondering if the areas along Coolidge where we have space that we could redevelop into something else, that we could encourage to redevelop into something that would be more of a commercial interest to not only people from the surrounding areas, but people in the neighborhood to go to and visit and go eat or something. That might also apply to Woodward. When we talk about these bus routes and what do we do with Woodward, the stops, the best stops are always the ones with destinations, places to go to when you get off the bus, or possibly a hub in between. I think that's kind of what we are right now, is a hub in between, you know, Ferndale, Birmingham, Royal Oak. And I just was thinking maybe there's a way to encourage some different types of uses to drive that interest.
That's good. You could even in the master plan, this is always a tricky thing in a plan, right? You've got a Rite Aid and a Chase Bank, and you don't want to give any impression that you're trying to chase viable uses out for a redevelopment, but we can have some ideas of how these sites could be redeveloped that could include a reconfigured Chase Bank in the future, Rite Aid or something else. So that's something we can look at is, can we fill in some of the parking areas here or redesign the areas with the buildings as they're shown, or is there a redevelopment plan, a longer term redevelopment plan that might interest the owners in the future? So
Yeah, and more interest may actually be beneficial to a Rite Aid, for example.
Yeah.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, and building on some of these comments, I think kind of tying it together is that walkability and density that I think would really help with that destination, or adding more mixed uses. And if you're talking about potentially some multifamily, maybe 4 units, it's that does help bring in different kinds of housing stocks. And that's really what we're talking about, is providing more options for people at different price points. And I think adding more mixed uses, whether it's restaurants or, a park, or making that mixed use and pedestrian friendly, and taking advantage and collaborating with the neighboring cities. I know traffic and lane reductions are controversial, especially right now, but I think it's something that we need to talk about and see if that could be accepted or fit into the plan, because I think it's helping to transform this corridor and the space so that it's not seen as, right now I see it as a barrier, right? You're protecting traffic from residents, where we could look at it differently and inverting it to be, hey, this is an asset rather than an eyesore.
it's good. Let's go over to 11 Mile.
Okay, just one quick thing, Brad. We have Jay's had his hand up, so Jay, can you ask your question?
Yes, thank you again. A couple of points I wanted to make. Number one, regarding road diet and traffic calming, and in general, is there really, truly a problem with this, or is this just, I've seen it all over the place. People say, oh yeah, let's do road calming and traffic calming and bike lanes. Is that really something that is necessary, is supported, or is it just, well, it's the latest thing to say it's in fashion to do that? Or are you trying to solve a problem that doesn't really exist? And it's not only trying to form on this particular issue, but on anything that we would want to do. Yes, to talk about it is fine, but as a matter of issue, are you trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist? Next, I wanted to take into account that any proposal that requires a change, a very massive change, that is, if you want to tear something down and replace it with something else, to take into account of, is this something that requires the expenditure of public funds, or to accomplish, does it require the use of eminent domain? Now, even if we decide we don't want to use that, I think that the final report should take that consideration into account, that says, if you want to do this and the current property owner does not want to, that the only way you're going to make it happen is use of eminent domain. And if we don't want to do that, then this report should clearly and unequivocally state that we will not use that process. My wife has a comment about in previous forums, there's been question about senior housing. Is that going to be taken into account in this entire master plan of what is or is not senior housing, senior specific housing, by any means, no matter how you accomplish it, is that going to be included? And finally, I have a comment which I have publicly expressed before the city commission in open public session, and is part of the public record, that the study that the University of Michigan did, and that had that visioning thing at City Hall where everybody could come and comment, that I have publicly said that that specific part of the report is invalid and should not be used for any public policy purposes whatsoever. The reason being is that it was poorly organized. The information that was attempted to be collected was not valid, could not be justified. And it was also the fact that the students who were doing that, they had no knowledge of the community or the issues. And in other words, it was a nice classroom project, but I also had a class doing that kind of stuff. Not exactly that, but similar things when I was attending university at Lawrence Tech. And if I had submitted work like that, the grade would not have been favorable to my overall GPA. Let's put it that way and be polite about it. So
Okay,
my comments again, Hank, and thank you for organizing this.
I'll just give a quick response to the 4 points I think you meant on road diets. So I'm doing a study for MDOT on the pros and cons of road diets and looking at other states and so forth. So I'm pretty well versed on road diets. Road diets can have an advantage by improving safety for people in vehicles and pedestrians and bicyclists. There's thresholds where a road diet can and probably isn't going to work very well. The thresholds are probably Coolidge is right around the threshold where it would or wouldn't work. So there can be advantages of increasing bicycle traffic or reducing fatalities and injuries, but you need to make sure that you still have a decent level of service for vehicles. So there's thresholds to put in there. We're not going to put in and recommend to you a plan that promotes a road diet or is against a road diet without be based on the national and Michigan thresholds and thresholds that are being put together right now by SEMCOG and MDOT. On eminent domain or whatever's going to happen on any of these properties, this is a plan that would just describe what potential would be there. This plan doesn't come into the programics or of eminent domain. So this plan isn't going to recommend using eminent domain or isn't going to say eminent domain can't be part of the plan because that's beyond that's into programming and capital improvements and so forth. That's not part of what this plan would look at, but the plan does look at public property and private property and says what's the future, what are things that could be considered here. That's what goes into the plan, and then things get implemented by a capital improvements plan or regulatory plan or the zoning ordinance or other things. The senior housing, what is senior housing? That's a really good question because senior housing can mean a lot of different things. I work with different developers. You've got independent seniors all the way up to assisted living and nursing care and so forth. So when we get into terms like senior housing, we'll have to describe who is the senior housing that we're trying to serve. Out of your aging in place master plan from I think 2015, and then if you're looking at specialized housing for senior housing, identify what type of housing would be of interest and where is that? Is there a location within Huntington Woods where that can be accommodated? And I have not seen the U of M vision study. I know some of you probably went to U of M or are big fans of U of M. I'm always suspicious of any student project that hasn't been, rightly organized, but there could be sparks of really interesting things that come out of the U of M or MSU or Eastern Michigan or Wayne State or whoever else has worked on Woodward Avenue. So we always take a look at it. Could be some interesting ideas there, but we're not going to necessarily further their recommendations as part of this plan. So,
Brad, we have two more questions and then we should move on. First off, Ronnie Nantis, you had your hand up. Apparently you were waving, but weren't quite sure how to get on.
Yes, I do have a question regarding vocabulary. Road diet and traffic calming, is this elimination of a traffic lane and putting in parking and bike routes as they did in Berkeley?
So it could be repurposing lanes, it could be adding in parking or bike lanes, or it could just be expanding sidewalks. So it just means road diet is a common term, but I don't really often use it. Is just, is there a potential to repurpose the lane or to expand the curb? If you have 4 lanes, 5 lanes, 3 lanes, and then what are the number of lanes that you need? And then if there's extra space, should it be for parking or bike paths or something else?
Thank you for clarification.
Thank you, Chris.
Road diet is kind of similar, but road diet is, traffic calming is sort of ideas to slow the vehicles down to a place where you think maybe the speeds are higher than they need to be. And traffic calming can be a whole number of ways to try to get vehicles slowed down. So maybe if it's signed 25 and people are going 32, are there ways you can get people to be closer to 25? And that could be changing the lane configurations. It could be adding islands. It could be a lot of different things that could try to slow vehicles down. But to do that, first, you've got to document that there is a problem there before you start to do traffic calming.
Thank you. Chris, let's take your question and then we'll move on to the next site.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. I think I just, to Jay's point with, road dieting and so forth. And this is somebody that myself, I bike, I run, I walk in the neighborhoods. I run along Woodward. I've run around the 696 corridor around Rackham and back up along my running and biking routes. So definitely interested to hear more about road dieting and things like that. And also, do we have any metrics from Berkeley's road diet on Coolidge, along with the business feedback as well? Or do you know of any of that?
So I know a little bit of the Berkeley thing. I had worked on a study a few years ago where we had kind of concluded that the road diet wouldn't work. So they hired a different consultant who said it would work, but it was right on the border. So Berkeley's had, I think, very mixed reaction, just like when it was been talked about for years, where some of the businesses along Coolidge were all in favor of it, some were dead against it, and some were kind of probably half were kind of neutral and wanted to see what happened. I think the residents that I've seen from discussions I've had have been very mixed as well. I think there was some feeling that there's congestion at 11 and 12 mile that it's not as what we predicted. The congestion has been less than we predicted at 11 and 12, but they've had a little bit more congestion in some of the smaller blocks in between 11 and 12, like Catalpa. But they were partly concerned about pedestrian fatalities, but they put a pathway or a sidewalk in that doesn't have any lights or anything else that would often be recommended. And so fatalities went up after they put the crosswalk in. So I'd say the reaction has been kind of mixed. Usually when you put something like that in, you spend about 3 years evaluating data to see what the data is. Last I heard, before COVID-19, the city was still in the process of looking at it. I don't know if they did speed studies after. I know they did speed studies before they made the change. That was one of the things they wanted to do, is try to lower the speeds. And I don't know if they've done any speed studies afterward. In COVID-19, the volumes are lower now than they typically would be. So it's probably not a good time to be doing speed studies. So kind of varies all over Metro Detroit when road diets have been tried. I know Pleasant Ridge did one, and the speeds went down, I think, 7 miles an hour, which is a pretty significant reduction when they did their traffic calming just south of 696. But it all varies. We've had good success in Birmingham on West Maple. That the results are probably better than we expected. We've done a couple of the road diets in Birmingham that have had really positive results. So crashes went down, but speeds went down, and we haven't had congestion. So
Yeah, and just to follow up with that, it's just obviously it's just a very active community, right? There's a lot of people running and biking and walking in our neighborhoods, so it's something that definitely catches my eye.
Yep. Next, Hank. I thought you said 2 left, but maybe I missed one.
Yeah, I think you've got the 11 mile and well, you've kind of touched on it a little bit with the road diet, but the 11 mile commercial cluster.
Yeah. So I think there were some notes I saw in the chat, but any other reactions about the 11-mile commercial area, and any thoughts about the city hall site farther down on 11?
I think the city hall site is, you might want to explain a little bit there.
So the city hall site was just brought up as a possibility when you're looking at redevelopment, that the city hall site could, one thing you can look at in a master plan is looking at city property and see if there's any opportunities to redesign the city facilities. Was there, is there interest in updating City Hall or replacing City Hall in the future? Or is there a possibility of using some of the City Hall site for another use?
Well, years ago, there was a proposal stimulated, I think, by Lawrence to replace both public safety and City Hall, which are ancient. A good part of the property is not usable, the lower levels to a great extent. But to redo the first floor of a building with small commercial plus public safety and City Hall, and then put on 1 or 2 floors above that housing, so you could have mixed use. It could be either rental or it could be sale. It could be owned by the developer in the beginning and turnkeyed to the city after a certain point, a period of time. It would be a much more efficient use of that public space. Some of the storage could be moved off of that area, so you could have a much bigger facility there, and you could even have additional parkland.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I've worked with some cities. We've redeveloped the City Hall site to make it more efficient and come up with extra property, and just your neighbor, to the east where I look, after a lot of discussion, we're, putting in a new City Hall where our firm is working on the design of a new park downtown that never used to be a park in the past. So there can be potential of redeveloping the City Hall site and being maybe a more efficient use of the City Hall property and make it more inviting. And then you might have some additional land for some other use. Any other thoughts about the City Hall site?
Yeah, Rick Poland, our Planning Commission Vice Chair.
Yeah, building off what Jeff said, we need to address the aging city infrastructure at City Hall and public safety and the storage building behind there. So I'd like to look at what was their planned useful life, where are we at, and how many years can we still get out of those buildings, and what is the current cost liability to replace those in the future. And then jumping back to the 11-mile commercial cluster, I'd like to review the use of that park, especially the skate park, and just review the benefits it offers to the residents and how many of our residents are currently using it and find it beneficial.
See, the advantage of 11 Mile Road is any construction would have shadows going east-west, so it would not impact neighboring homes as it relates to shadow or sun.
Okay. Commissioner Elder?
I think City Hall, we'll just call this 3+ acres, the whole site. This is an asset to all of us, and we pay taxes, right? We all own a small part of this land. And frankly, it's deteriorating. This asset is not highest and best use right now. It should, in my opinion, still remain a center of community because we all own a part of it. And I think this is the one site in all of the ones that we've reviewed so far that we have complete control over. And we have alignment with potentially redevelopment ready community incentives, cash grants, and incentives to incentivize developers. If we can zone it in the right way and make this like a, center of community, make this a pedestrian oriented design so that the adjacent neighbors see this as an asset to be able to access and walk to. City Hall to me is the identity of the community. And right now the identity of the community is the Parks and Rec site, the building. And that's fine. But I think one of the strengths of Huntington Woods is our community and our engagement with each other. So if you have more spaces for those interactions between, older residents and younger families and people in the community, I think that's the asset, that's the strength of our identity as a community. And that's what attracts families to move here. I think it's a large enough site to entertain mixed uses. And City Hall being the heart of it, but perhaps there could be neighborhood serving type of retail, maybe a little coffee shop, maybe an ice cream shop. You've got, men's field right there. So there's outside activities and there's opportunities for beautification there and to continue to support that site. But when you have those outdoor activities, it creates more activities outside. And so there's, opportunities, I think, that could enhance the quality of life for people that live around the site. I know change is scary sometimes, and thinking about that site in a different way might be just overwhelming to many people who've been here for a long time. But there's also outdoor public space that, could be beautified and revamped with this whole 3+ acres. And thinking about how we pay for this, Chris Lineberger is one of the top influential minds of urban planning and real estate development. He actually did come and look at the site earlier this year, and he gave us some ideas. And one of the interesting things that I think is worth, I'm not proposing it, I'm not like supporting it, I'm just saying this is an interesting idea that maybe should be asked and get reactions, and see what the community might be interested in, is if you do put rental housing on that site and enter into a land contract with the city so that the city still owns the land, you're not giving away the land. But that is a way that we could get a brand new City Hall built with no cost to the taxpayers. That is just one idea. I think that's just an example. And I think we can get creative. We can get feedback from the community on what, density they would accept. Maybe the answer is no density. Maybe they just want a new City Hall, and that's fine. But I think we need to really look at the site and ask ourselves, what do we want to do with this property? Because it is not reflective, I think, of our beautiful community and its surroundings. It's dilapidated, and we need to do something here.
This is great, Hank. I think we had good discussion on all the properties. unless there's more questions, maybe turn it back to Anne Marie to go
Let's
through the
just take, we have two
homework
more
assignment.
questions. Why don't we just end up with those two and then we'll turn it back? Is that okay with you, Brad, or do you
Sure.
have to jump off?
Nope, that's good.
Okay, Ellie?
Hello, hi, sorry, may have to run, my kid has to go to the bathroom. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so one of the things I wanted to bring up, I know I don't know, I hope it's not too off point, because I know we were talking about walkability and the even some of the roads. And one of the things I want to bring up, I know I've brought it in the past. I used to live actually right across from City Hall. You know, I think that Michelle raised some really great points about City Hall. But I think one of the things we also have to look at is having a crosswalk, like at Scotia and 11 miles, so you can cross to the cities. There's no pathway to cross from Coolidge to Woodward. So that's almost, I think it's close to 2 miles where you cannot cross from our city into Berkeley or vice versa. I think a crosswalk and a light, maybe it's some sort of a blinking light or something that can be triggered by pedestrians, so it doesn't necessarily have to be functioning at all hours, at all times, but something to enable pedestrians and bikers to be able to cross somewhere between that long stretch of road and unite communities.
Thank you. Louise is our vice chair for our Historic District Commission. You also had your hand up and wanted to comment? You got to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So with that introduction, I'm sure that my comments are not going to be surprising. I absolutely disagree with, you know, Michelle's commentary about how dilapidated City Hall is. I think it's really cute. I think it's the gateway to Huntington Woods. It's a small profile on that land. I think if you were to go ahead and put mixed use, whether it was shops or apartments, that corner would become unnavigable. Right? It's already busy as it is. And so not only would we be causing a lot of congestion, I've tried to Ellie's point, I've crossed there many times and it is a little like human Frogger, if you all get that video game reference. But not only that, coming on to 11 Mile, but I think the cross traffic going down Scotia, which is already busy. And we know that that's where the rec center is, that's where the pool is, that's where the library is, that's where the elementary school is, that increasing traffic on that street to get to 696 to the service drive, I think you know, it's gonna become a hazard. I think just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean that you should do it. We need to remember that Huntington Woods is just 1 square mile. We have a lot of gathering places. We have lots of parks. We have Rackham Golf Course. We have half of the zoo. You know, as I said, you know, if City Hall was someplace else, I'm not sure I would participate as I've been doing the last 2 years. You know, I think we need to think closely about, you know, leveling that area because there's really is nothing wrong with it. How many people work in that building as it is? That's not somewhere I go and spend a lot of time. I go in, I pay my bills, I go to some meetings and I leave. So, you know, I think, in my opinion, it works as it is. Does, you know, everything need a little updating every once in a while? Yeah, but just because it needs updating doesn't mean you need to get rid of it. So that's what I feel about that.
Anything else? Hank, maybe have Anne Marie do some closing comments. Again, there was good discussion. Anne Marie, you want to kind of take us again through the next steps?
Sure. Let me bring that back up, and thanks everyone for all the great comments. I had a lot of typing to do, but that's great. We like to see a lot of interaction in these meetings. So let me bring up the presentation. Yep, so just a reminder, we have the website up, so please go to the website. You can see that now. I think Pink's gonna also provide that on the city's website, so there'll be a link from the city's website to the project website. And we'll be updating that as we get into the process more. So there's not a ton on the website right now, but we just kind of set it up, and we'll be putting, survey on there. We'll be putting events on there just to keep people informed. And then the working session is proposed to be May 17th. And again, Hank's going to be sending you a review worksheet that you're just going to be looking over from what's happened from the current previous master plans and what you think should be staying in and what needs to kind of be replaced or refreshed. And then we'll be going over some existing conditions and best practices. It sounds like there's some ideas and that came up tonight, like traffic calming. Those are maybe some things that we can go over with you in greater detail during that meeting. And then again, we have this, the Community Visioning Forum is anticipated for June 3rd. So mark your calendars for that. And again, please spread the word. And thank you again for taking the time this evening. Again, we're very excited to be working with you. Oh, Hank, I think you're muted.
How do you like that? I muted myself. Okay, well, anyway, I'd like to thank Anne Marie. I'd like to thank Brad. And I'd like to thank Justin, the MKSK team, and I'd like to thank all the residents who came out tonight to share their comments with us. There's going to be a lot more opportunities for questions and a lot more opportunities to share your opinions and your thought processes as we move forward with the master plan. Again, we will be linking the website that MKSK has developed to our website. There will be information forthcoming, and as Anne Marie mentioned, there will be worksheets that go out to the Planning Commission for their thoughts on this. We will be meeting on the 17th, which is a special meeting. We'll set the date at the next meeting on Monday, the regular Planning Commission meeting. And again, thank you all for showing up tonight. And if you have any other questions, I'll hang around for a little bit, but thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone.